CNBC's Equity and Opportunity, bringing diverse perspectives to the forefront, shining a spotlight on organizations, and providing a platform for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Learn more at equityandopportunity.com. Voices and visibility for all.
The country continues to get much more diverse.
The reality is we need leaders and workers, all levels, all ranks, diverse and included.
It's really about, better business practices. We know that when you have one woman on a corporate board, that you have 26% staff performance growth relative to all male boards.
We will be able to make better decisions. We will have better discussions, and we get a lot of good advice from our board because of how diverse it is.
We want a variety of experiences, different perspectives, diverse backgrounds. It makes us think better, it makes us approach investing better, and it leads to better decisions.
We talk a lot about diversity, equity, inclusion, and I'm super proud of that because it starts at the top, not just in terms of gender and ethnicity, but in terms of thought and experience and age.
All the evidence shows that if we close the racial wealth gap and income gap, all Americans will be made better off.
Those of you who have broken down barriers, shattered ceilings, and kicked down doors, the community needs you to stay vocal, visible, and involved.
It takes all of us. This is a team sport.
Welcome to the CNBC Equity and Opportunity Forum. I'm Sharon Epperson at CNBC headquarters, along with my colleague, Tyler Matheson. We're very pleased to have you join us for this important conversation today.
We sure are, Sharon, and it's great to see you. Great to have you in the house here in Englewood Cliffs. Well, as we hopefully emerge from one crisis, the pandemic, another crisis sadly has emerged in Ukraine. And while our thoughts are with the people there, we certainly don't want to lose sight of the work to be done on the lingering challenge here at home, the lack of equity and opportunity for all. Today's event aims to give actionable solutions to these struggles and move the conversation forward, perhaps most importantly. Sharon, you've been an editorial leader for us in our Inclusion in Action series and in today's Equity and Opportunity Forum.
Well, thank you, Tyler. It is a critical time for workers in the U.S. and around the globe. And today, we're going to look at different ways to create, advance, and sustain equity and opportunity. We'll hear from leaders such as Renee Jones, CEO and chairman of M&T Bank, and Nina Vaca of Pinnacle Group on how those in the top job can think and lead differently to create better outcomes at their companies. And we'll talk about how fintech is creating more opportunities for financial inclusion with the founder of Blockfi and the founder and CEO of Tala. And find out how getting out of your comfort zone and talking about things you may not be used to discussing can be a path to breaking down barriers with author and former NFL star Emmanuel Acho. The work of creating a more diverse and equitable workplace and world belongs to all of us, and we are up to the challenge here as part of the NBC News Group. Joining us now with a few words of welcome, the chairman of NBC Universal News Group, Cesar Conde.
Hey, everyone. I'm delighted to welcome you to CNBC's Forum on Equity and Opportunity. We're thrilled to be hosting the forum again this year. As the nation's most viewed news organization, we at the NBC Universal News Group have a special responsibility to promote the highest standards of journalism and provide our viewers with the most accurate and comprehensive news coverage. That mission can only be achieved if we ourselves reflect all of the audiences that we serve across our television, streaming, and digital platforms at NBC News, MSNBC, and CNBC. We're all familiar with the demographic trends. Our nation reached a milestone in 2020 when the percentage of people who are under age 18 and who are also people of color moved past 50%. By 2040, the population of the entire country is expected to surge past a similar threshold. These trends have profound impacts on our workforce and on innovation itself. Recognizing the need to act promptly, we established the 50% Challenge Initiative nearly 2 years ago. Our aspiration, over time, is to have 1 of every 2 of our team members be a person of color and 1 of every 2 be a woman. This initiative will lead to greater diversity of our workforce from a socioeconomic and geographic perspective, and it will bring a greater diversity of experiences to our teams. It's just not the right thing to do. It's also the right thing to do for our business. Our effort is about more than just hiring a highly qualified and diverse workforce. It's also about sustaining a culture that empowers all team members to bring their whole selves to the job and inspiring leaders throughout our organization to take meaningful steps that promote inclusivity. These issues are hardly unique to us. Your participation in events such as today's forum reflects your commitment to addressing them. You have a stellar group of experts today, and I know this will be a worthwhile forum. Thank you so much for participating, and enjoy today's event.
And thank you, Caesar. Great to hear from our leadership on this topic. They've really led the way, I have to say, in the world of news and events. And we want to also take a moment right now to thank our sponsor, the Society for Human Resource Management. We will hear from SHRM's CEO a little later in the program. We couldn't do anything like this without the participation of sponsors and our event partners, whom we also want to recognize and thank right now, many of whom will be participating, Sharon, later in the day in our exchange program, and that takes place after the main part of the program. You know, Sharon, I don't want to over promise about NBC Universal, NBC News Group, but in the past couple of years, specifically since the death of George Floyd, Caesar and NBC has really gotten out there and led, and you can see the differences in the newsroom, on air, behind the scenes. This is now a much more thriving, flourishing, diverse workplace.
A more diverse workplace that talks about how to be more inclusive every single week. We have a coffee chat that just ended for NBC News Group where we talk about the issues that we're facing, how we can improve our teams, what we can do to advance diversity and inclusion and belonging in the company. I think that's very important. I know it certainly is motivating for me to tune into these coffee chats and participate every week, and I think a number of employees are doing that throughout the company.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think we're walking the walk, not just talking the talk. And I think the consciousness of many corporations has been raised over the past couple of years, in part through events like this. Sharon, take it away.
Absolutely. So important, Tyler. And it's important now to get to our first interview. You know, the pandemic has shed a light on many economic barriers that still exist for underrepresented communities. And the U.S. Treasury is looking to play a central role in addressing this problem by appointing its first ever counselor for racial equity, Janice Bowdler. She joins us now with CNBC senior congressional correspondent, Ilan Moy. Ilan?
Well, thank you so much, Sharon, and thank you so much, Janice, for joining our conversation today and kicking things off. I want to start by asking you about your title, Counselor for Racial Equity. As Sharon mentioned, you're the first person to ever have this job, ever to hold this title. What does it mean? What is your role at the department?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here with you and help kick off this truly amazing lineup. I'm really grateful. And yes, first ever counselor for racial equity, it's incredibly humbling. You know, from day one, racial equity has been a priority for the Biden-Harris administration, and for good reason, because the failure to invest in communities that have been underserved is money left on the table. It's a drag on our national economy. And that's just one of the reasons why it's so important for the Treasury Department. Secretary Yellen has been clear on this point, that the economy has not worked well for communities of color, for Black, Latino, AAPI, and Native communities. And I think we can all agree that it's a moral issue, but it is also an economic issue. If we don't act, we're not going to be able to realize our shared vision of economic growth and recovery.
I feel like, Janice, for many years after the Great Recession, people talked about inequality in terms of wealth accumulation, how many people were being left out of the recovery. Now we're seeing inflation as one of the key challenges of this economy. And now I'm hearing folks talk about inflation inequality, where the lowest income households and often, too often, communities of color are feeling the brunt of higher prices more than the rest of society. What do you think about that? What are the ways that Treasury can help buffer that pain?
Yep. Our goal is to create an economy where everybody can reach their full potential, where everybody can live financially secure. And my job at Treasury is really to leave no stone unturned to try to create that more fair economy. The way that we are going to do this, really, as you said, is by recognizing and centering the needs of the most vulnerable, those that are at greatest risk of being left behind. And we know that Black, Latino, AAPI Native communities, also rural communities, those impacted by climate change, that's where we see the greatest amount of risk. So we have to start there. We have to be making investments around the most vulnerable. And that's what Treasury has been doing. That's where we're going to see the greatest return on investment.
What are the best ways that you all have found to reach out to communities that maybe have not had that relationship with the Treasury Department, with the government previously?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked this question, because I think this is one of the things that this Treasury Department is really doing differently, thanks to the vision of Secretary Yellen. So let me mention two things. Really important to designing and building a racial equity agenda is getting proximate. We have to get close to communities that are experiencing challenges. That's where we're going to find a lot of solutions. We just have to put the fuel behind what people know it works for their communities. So two ways that we're doing that. First, the Treasury created an Office of Community Engagement that has created an open door to have more transparency and create a feedback loop for community and business leaders to come in and share real-time feedback on how Treasury is impacting their communities. People might not realize, but the department is responsible for administering more than $1 trillion of recovery funds to community, businesses, families that have been affected by COVID-19. So it's important as we do that, that we're thinking about Black and brown communities that we know historically have been slower to recover during times of economic downturn.
Can you tackle these initiatives with the current funding that you have? I cover Congress. I know that the fight to get funding from lawmakers can be a challenging one and sometimes an uphill battle. Do you need more money, in order to reach the goals that you've set out?
Well, certainly the president has put forward an ambitious agenda in Build Back Better. I think there's always more that we can do. But our focus right now, as I mentioned, $1 trillion is really important. And that is real relief that is flowing to families, helping them stay in their homes, helping to build businesses. In fact, right now, we're in the middle of supporting states who are standing up the State Small Business Credit Initiative. That is going to provide guarantees, loan dollars, equity investments to really fuel the growth of small businesses on the ground. And I'm really proud that there's a special focus in that program on socially and economically disadvantaged individuals who are trying to grow and maintain their business. I think there's real progress to be made in these programs, and a lot of people don't know that Treasury is out there working in their communities like this.
You've worked in the private sector now as well as in the government sector. What are the ways that the two sides can work together? What are some of the, ways that you're reaching out to private industry to say, hey, you can be a partner in this and you can help as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned all the relief dollars that we're putting out on the street. Within that, more than $20 billion is going to community finance partners. Think community banks, CDFIs, nonprofit loan funds, to fuel community projects, health care centers, child care centers, affordable housing, and of course, small businesses. That investment can be leveraged by the private sector, and we're hoping that they're going to come in and align their investments in a way that's going to create a force multiplier in communities that have long been starved of resources. I can't emphasize this enough. This is where we are going to see our biggest return on investment, by directing dollars to places that have historically been underserved. And we know that that includes a lot of communities of color.
What do you hear from business leaders, from CEOs, or even others in Washington when you bring this message to them? Are people prioritizing this in the same way the Treasury Department is, or do you find some skepticism about whether or not these targeted initiatives are really needed?
No, I think we're seeing a lot of receptivity. I mean, look, I think forums like this are really important as we get further and further from the racial reckoning that was inspired by the really tragic murder of George Floyd. It's possible that people start to forget that this fades into the rearview mirror. And it takes all of us to remember that problems that are rooted in our history of structural racism and a legacy of policies that have left Black, Brown, AAPI, Native communities out of policies that have built the middle class. We're not going to change that in just a day, but it's why it's so important that federal agencies take on these barriers and this legacy head on, and why we need the private sector to come along with us. I think that message resonates, and people want to work together to make action happen.
So these are some really big goals, and you've been in the job for 5, maybe 6 months. What is your measure of success when you look at the end of the year, or when you set those markers or milestones for yourself? How will you know if you've succeeded, if the department has succeeded?
Well, like I said, the goal, the North Star here, is to create an economy where everybody has a chance to reach their full potential and live financially secure. And I think we're going to get there when we can see more communities of color building their own businesses, when we see investment flowing into their neighborhoods. I'm really proud that part of this initiative is measuring our success and having a strong feedback loop so that we can continue to understand the extent to which we're really reaching our goal and make changes where we need to. But at the end of the day, our measure of success is, are families able to move up the economic ladder? Are they able to reach their potential? Are they able to live financially secure lives?
What about trust? There has been a lack of trust in Washington, a lack of trust in government, and the pandemic really exacerbated America's view of our public institutions. How do you start to rebuild that, especially with communities of color?
Yeah, proximity matters. So we can't just confine ourselves to the four walls of our institutions or, frankly, to the Washington Beltway. We have to get out into communities and listen to people closest to the problem. I think that's not only how we're going to come up with the really big solutions and the most effective solutions, it's also how we're going to rebuild trust. And the programs that Treasury is responsible for administering, for example, the state and local fiscal relief funds, really give states, localities, counties a lot of flexibility to map the needs in their communities and align dollars and resources to meet those needs. I think those kinds of programs bring us a little bit closer together and help to rebuild some of that trust.
Janice Bowdler, the first counselor for racial equity to the U.S. Treasury Department, thank you so much for taking the time out to talk to us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Great. Tyler, I'll send it back over to you.
All right, and our thanks also to the counselor and to you, Elon, very much. Appreciate that. A reminder to you in our audience, we want you to join the conversations. The more you take part, the more you'll learn, the better you'll feel about today's event. And for those of you who are already in our virtual platform, you can submit your questions and comments, as many of you are doing, in the chat window on the right side of the screen. We're kind of like Zoom or other products like that. Now, if you're watching somewhere else, you can also take part, like you're watching on YouTube or Twitter or LinkedIn or our website, and you want to be part of the conversation. Scan the QR code. We're just going to leave it up there on the screen for a little bit. Scan the QR code now, and that will lead you to our event platform, where you'll sign in and you can ask questions, take part in the sidebar conversation with speakers, connect with other attendees, and let people know that you're watching and here. There are literally thousands of you taking part in this event right now. Well, according to the World Bank, 1/3 of the global population remains unbanked. That means lacking access to financial products and services. And that translates to poverty in many cases. The solution may lie in fintech, which is using digital technology and crypto to tackle financial inequity and exclusion. Here to tell us more is Flory Marquez, founder of cryptocurrency platform Blockfi, and Shivani Soroya, founder and CEO of digital lending app Tala, a CNBC disruptor company twice. Kate Rooney is our technology reporter, and she will moderate the program from here. Kate?
Thank you so much, Tyler, Flory, and Shivani. It's great to see you. Thanks so much for being here. We're going to talk about crypto, like Tyler said, fintech as well in this discussion. And I do want to start with financial inclusion on the global stage right now. Crypto is very much playing a role in Eastern Europe. Flory, let's start with you. How is Blockfi supporting clients in Ukraine right now?
There's so many different ways in which crypto is a part of the global stage at the moment. And last week at Blockfi, we announced that we are giving $50 to each of our Ukrainian clients. And in addition, we are pausing all loan payments to all clients in Ukraine. In addition, we do have a lot of employees in Poland. And from the teammates that I've talked to there, they're actually mobilizing themselves and helping pick up Ukrainian citizens on the border and helping them place them in different places within Poland. So we're very, very supportive of that as well. But in the many different ways in which crypto is playing a part of global markets at the moment, I do want to focus on one thing specifically that has not existed before. And that is the fact that if you are a Ukrainian citizen at the moment and you use services like Blockfi or you have financial assets in crypto, you can take your financial assets with you wherever you are going. And that is a pivotal difference that has not existed before crypto was available to these types of clients. And I think it makes a huge difference for Ukrainian clients today.
Got it. And Shivani, I'm not sure if you have thoughts on that as well, or more broadly, how cryptocurrencies can help with financial inclusion in times of war or economic uncertainty.
I think that when we see, uncertainty happening across many of these markets, and when we think about the security and peace of mind that our customers or individuals lose as a result of not being able to access their money or being able to really save, spend, grow their capital in the ways that they would want to, I think we really do see the fact that both companies like Tala as well as Blockfi that are leveraging digital technology as well as crypto can really play a part in creating that stability.
Got it. And does it need to be crypto? I mean, there are a lot of other ways to expand access with digital finance or even traditional finance that might not necessarily need to be built on blockchain. What are some other examples? Flory, I know you work at a crypto company, but how else can digital technology help closing the gap here when it comes to financial access?
So I think that one of the most exciting things about crypto today is the fact that I do think it creates a new landscape in which demographics that have historically been excluded from financial systems can enter for the first time today. And I think that that exists both in the U.S. and abroad. So if we think about U.S. investors specifically, we've really focused on how do people think about investing for the first time. And I think with the rise of crypto assets, there's this new type of excitement about putting your money to work for you. And we're seeing demographics who historically haven't been active investors and to enter into this space for the first time by purchasing crypto and other assets like that. And on the global scale, I think what's extremely exciting is that for the first time in history, we can make U.S.-grade financial products available to clients overseas instantly, directly through a mobile app. And that's because with crypto, you can just send funds instantly using your mobile phone or your laptop. And for the first time in history, for example, clients of ours can access U.S. dollar loans at U.S. interest rates, which is at around 10%. And that's extremely powerful for retail clients who historically haven't been able to access these types of credit products. So there's a lot that we can do both in the U.S. to make sure that demographics who have historically not been active investors, watching them participate for the first time, and also making U.S.-grade financial services available to clients overseas.
It's really interesting. It is very much a global asset class. I do want to talk about lending. Shivani, I know Tala is more focused on the lending side. There's a thought that data and technology could be less biased in some ways. Can you walk us through how technology can be used in lending to reduce inequality and how you're doing that at Tala?
That's a great question. Tala is building the world's most accessible financial services platform for the global underestimated. And so there are over 2.5 billion individuals around the world that are currently lacking access to traditional financial products. So really the ability to save their money securely, to be able to earn yield on that, to be able to make simple payments that are essential to their daily lives, and to be able to, again, grow their financial stability over time, whether that's through working capital or just, again, investing in things that can improve their quality of life. And so what we've done is really leverage digital technology and mobile technology to be able to alternatively credit score these individuals and understand their capacity, understand their behavior, and really understand their financial needs where they are. And so I'll give you a quick example of something that we did in Mexico during COVID, which is really help invest in over 300,000 small business owners that were female small business owners that unfortunately lost their jobs during COVID. And really they were able to use this capital to be able to start online businesses. And so, one, it creates the opportunity for individuals to really have that power in their hands. So they can actually download the app, they can sign up, and there isn't a need for any particular kind of identity, national ID, or any kind of, formal credit history. We are able to use alternative data to understand where they are in their lives and then be able to provide them access to the liquidity that they needed at that time to be able to go move towards opportunity and again, be able to create that stability for their families.
What kind of data are you talking about when you say alternative data and things that don't necessarily incorporate a FICO score? What types of things are you looking at?
So we're still using traditional categories. Sorry.
Oh, Shivani, you go ahead, and then Floria, I'd love to get your take on that as well.
Well, at Tala, we're still looking at it in the sense that we really do want to understand, is this the individual that they say they are? So we think about first, how do we verify their identity? And so there's different pieces of information that we can bring in, which may be, a voter ID, a ration card. It may be different things that, again, allow us to understand that this is that individual that is applying through the device. The second thing we want to understand is capacity. So things like merchant payments, consistency of bill payments, remittances, other transactions that may allow us to really understand, again, their cash flow history. And then the last piece is really for us to understand their character, their behavior, and that goes more into, were you referred into our system? Are you a first-time customer, a repeat customer? And so, again, we really want to think of it as the likelihood that this individual can repay. And so there's different pieces of information that we bring in that really give us that approximation towards, again, character and capacity.
Got it. And Floria, I'd love to get your take on that. I'd also want to ask you about some of the crypto native lending that you guys are doing and how you work with regulators and get them comfortable with that asset class when it comes to more complicated instruments like loans. On one hand, there's the financial access part of it, and it seems like the White House and Biden administration have been thinking of crypto as a way to expand access, but they also have questions when it comes to cybersecurity and investor protection. How do you strike that balance?
Yeah, so there's two parts to the question, right? The first is, how are we using crypto to give clients access to U.S. dollar loans? And what's really beautiful about crypto assets, going back to client data, is that historically, U.S.-based financial institutions haven't been able to extend credit to overseas clients, very simply because in the U.S. we rely on credit scores. And so when crypto comes into play, if you're looking at a product like what we offer at Blockfi, a loan that's backed by crypto, we can instantly offer credit without using a credit score because we know that our clients can pay back the loan based on the amount of assets that they have on our platform. So that is a huge game changer. And if you look at the overseas market for US dollar denominated debt is around 14 trillion, and that's to corporates. That market has never been tapped before for retail clients. So we're very excited about being able to extend credit overseas. And to your second question about the regulatory environment, BlockFi's mission is to build the bridge between traditional finance and crypto. And that mission has three parties. You have retail clients, you have your investors, and the last part is regulators. And a huge part of what's going to happen over the next few years is you're going to have companies like BlockFi be able to build products that can fit into the existing regulatory framework. And so when you look at loans, for example, there are ways to structure these products in a way that it can play by the rules that regulators want to see both in the US and abroad. And that's exactly what we try to do at BlockFi.
Got it. Well, Flory and Shivani, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for being here. A lot to watch in both the crypto and the fintech space. Tyler, we'll send it back over to you.
All right, Kate, thank you very much, and our thanks as well to Flory and Shivani. Now, before our next session on leadership, we'd like to hear from you in the audience. And for you on the platform right now, click the polls tab on the right side of your screen just above the chat and type in your, it's either polls or Slido, one of those two words, and give us your one-word answer, one word only, to this question. What is the one single characteristic crucial for leaders who are trying to create an equitable workplace? We will then be able to see your answers in real time. We'll collate, aggregate them as you start to vote, and we will share those results momentarily. Again, what is the one characteristic that you would cite as being critical to leadership for diversity, equity, and inclusion? For those of you watching elsewhere on the web, again, scan the QR code on the screen to join us in the platform where you once again can vote and chat. And there is the QR code down there. I don't know whether you would say that word is empathy, compassion. Is it listening? That might be mine. Meantime, before we share those results, we'll pull them in right now. Let's hear from our sponsor, the Society for Human Resource Management.
Hello, I'm Johnny C. Taylor Jr., President and CEO of SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management. At SHRM, we are encouraging our members as HR leaders to make meaningful change in their organizations, to make events, not just respond to them, to set the curve, not just catch up. We call it cause the effect. In business, it starts and ends with corporate culture, more specifically, inclusive and equitable culture. A culture that envisions and creates opportunity for all. I've been telling my fellow executives a first step is closing our nation's collective empathy deficit. Yes, you heard it correctly. Empathy. Political divisions, social isolation, deteriorating civility have all contributed to a national epidemic of failing to see life through the eyes of others. As a result, 20% of U.S. workers say they feel unvalued at work. Not undervalued, unvalued. This cannot continue. Our workforce is as diverse as ever, yet we've never been so divided. We've let our collective empathy muscles atrophy. I challenge each one of you to look and listen with a lens of empathy. When you hear someone say something that doesn't sit quite right with you, step back a little and ask yourself, I wonder why that person said that, what led them there. Let's all strengthen our empathy muscles. It's not just the right thing to do, it's the smart business thing to do. One person can cause an effect. One person in HR can challenge outdated hiring practices, champion modern benefits, advocate for pay equity, and turn jobs into careers. HR empowers others to not only dream of change, but to create it. The actions of a few affect the lives of many. Join SHRM today to cause the effect you wish to see in the workplace.
And our thanks very much to Johnny and, of course, to SHRM for sponsoring today's event. Well, before we took that little break, we asked you to tell us the one characteristic that's crucial for leaders who are trying to create a more equitable workplace. Sharon, let's see how our audience answered. It's almost as if they said it before Johnny started speaking.
Exactly.
Empathy.
And that was the first word that came to mind. Tyler, before you said it, that was the first word that came to my mind. But I also appreciate what you said about listening. And it's not just listening, but being an active listener, really engaging with what people have to say, listening and then internalizing that and acting on it. Not just listening and passing it off and do what you want to do, but really be an active listener. I think that's so important. And that comes along with being open-minded, just like people have submitted here with the word cloud.
Yeah, and you can see the basic size of the lettering of the font there determines who has said what how many times. I would say listening is critical because I think most people simply want to be heard, and that's the beginning building block. That might have been my answer. But also empathy. I mean, I think turning empathy into action, that's the turn that has to be made here. So, Sharon, I'll turn it over to you as our next guests appear. Take it away.
Absolutely. It's an important turn to make. And Tyler, our next two guests possess many of the characteristics that were on that word cloud and so much more. The role of being a CEO is defined and being redefined now to meet modern day challenges and opportunities. Joining us to discuss how their upbringings and past experiences laid the foundation for how they lead and at their respective companies today are Renee Jones, the chairman and CEO of M&T Bank, and Nina Vaca, the founder and CEO of the Pinnacle Group. I'm so glad to see both of you. Welcome and thank you for joining us. Nina, I want to start with you. You started your company with only $300 when you were 25 years old. It's now a $1 billion company with workers in 10 countries. Now, the Pinnacle Group has been named one of the fastest growing women-owned businesses in the country. I want to know how your personal story has influenced your leadership.
Oh, my personal story has influenced my personal leadership, who I am, the leader I am today, and the CEO I am today, immensely. There are so many elements of my childhood, but two things in particular, and that is entrepreneurship. My parents were immigrants that came to this country and found their American dream through entrepreneurship and all that it brings. But the second, and perhaps the most importantly, my mother was a civic activist. She led people, gave people a voice, garnered people together. And so I grew up with my parents teaching me, not through words, but through actions, that you must do both. So I honestly didn't know any better. I know that building a business goes hand in hand with building a community. And so 25 years later, I find myself doing just that at the Pinnacle Group, where our purpose is to connect people with opportunity.
Absolutely. So very important. And it's important to involve your personal experience in what you're doing and how you're leading. And Renee, you are one of only a few black CEOs in the Fortune 500. And you have actually said that your secret to success has been telling your story. Can you tell us how your story has influenced your leadership?
Yeah, I think, Sharon, I'll start with just sort of telling the story. I think I grew up in Massachusetts in a mixed-race family. My dad was African-American. He met my mom during World War II. She was from Belgium. And they got married in 1945. And at the time, the Army was still segregated until 1948. I am the youngest of 6 children. We cover every spectrum of the dark, light skin tone. And as a result of that, I grew up seeing stereotypes in a different way. I experienced oftentimes in being in one community, I was treated a different way because people were unsort of suspecting of what my race might be or what my background might be. And that really led to what I think today is somewhat of a superpower. We often think of stereotypes as things that are negative, but I think there's an opportunity to turn those around into a really positive opportunity. Oftentimes when people don't expect you to do something, it's the best time when you can sort of step up and deliver. And so today, most of my focus is around talent. I would say about 101% of it is around talent. And I spend a lot of time listening, absorbing, and learning from my colleagues and what their personal story is, so that it opens up my ability to learn from them.
Yeah, listening and absorbing what your colleagues have to say, what people on your teams have to say is so very important. But there's a really interesting dialogue going on right now in the chat, and I encourage all of you to submit your questions, make your comments, and comment on what you're hearing today. Colleen and Letitia have this dialogue going back and forth about whether or not people are still communicating with one another, or have people become entrenched in recent times in their own perspectives and not willing to budge. And so, Renee, I wanted to ask you about that as you are talking about the stereotypes that you've overcome. How have you used people's misperceptions to lead?
Well, I think it's really important from the perspective if you can begin to tell your story, and in my case, I think sometimes my story surprises folks. It actually sets them on a path to listening a little bit more. So by exhibiting the behaviors you want, you can get your team actually to move towards a common set of values over time. I really think that our ability. If you think of organizations today, we're much less reliant on traditional hierarchical structures. So we have flatter structures. We're looking for agility. We're looking for flexibility and inclusiveness so that ideas can actually move faster to the top of the queue. So it really requires us to sort of encourage people to tell their story, to open up to dialogue, and as we said, to really listen, to find the best opportunities in the next path.
Absolutely, very important. Another audience question I want to get to from Rika asks, what were the challenges that you had to overcome to make meaningful change in your organization, and where did you get stuck? Nina?
You know, for me, the answer to that question always begins at the very top. I started the company when I was 25 years old, and now I'm more tenured 25 years later. And so to create change in an entire company, the first thing you must do is transform yourself and have an open mindset. Creating and having an open mindset to learning and reinventing yourself and being the leader that you need to be, surrounding yourself by the right people. That's where it begins, because the company will not change until the CEO at the top changes.
Very important, very important. And Renee, what would you say to that question? The idea of making sure that you're...
I think the idea of focusing on yourself first. I often walk into a room, and when I'm introducing a space that we want to move to or a new conversation, I often say, I want to start out by saying, I'm working on myself. I need a lot of advice to move to this new place. I think, at the end of the day, the more we can include people and create environments where people are encouraged and championed to speak up and share their ideas, the more competitive we're going to be. I think that's the most important.
Very important.
And I find that if you role model that behavior of vulnerability, if you role model that behavior that Renee's talking about by allowing yourself to say, I may not know the answer, I'm working on this. When you role model that behavior to your management team, they in turn do it to their team and in turn to their team, and that's the way that you create culture.
Nina, can you give me an example of an uncomfortable conversation that you had to have recently? I'm sure you have many of them, but how that conversation actually led to a change that you believe was a change for the better in terms of making your company more inclusive, more profitable, just more successful?
I find that today in America, we have a lot of uncomfortable conversations, and the skill as a leader, as a conscious leader, to be able to have conversations with people that don't think like us, I think is a very powerful skill and an essential skill to have as a CEO, as a leader. And it can't be more relevant than now in our country, where we have lots of challenges and people thinking differently. We have a challenge not of people thinking politically differently. It's not a political problem. It's a worldview problem. And the way that you can come or approach the problem, in my mind, is seeking higher ground. And difficult conversations, it's important to seek higher ground. And what that means is to listen and to empathize and to understand that everybody has a worldview. And the worldviews that people have come from their upbringing, their natural biases, their experiences. And so to empathize and to reach higher ground is to actively listen with no judgment, with the opportunity, with an open mindset, with an intention to listen and to learn. And you might find yourself that with awareness, there is choice. Without it, there is only habit. So whenever I get into a different and difficult conversation, I activate those those skill sets about myself, to listen actively with no judgment, to seek a higher ground, to understand, and to treat people with the platinum rule, not the golden rule. The golden rule, as you know, is to treat people how you would want to be treated, and the platinum rule is to treat people how they would want to be treated. And if you listen closely, you'll figure that out.
Absolutely, absolutely. Renee, I have another question from the audience from Fallon, who's asking, could you please share a time where your leadership has helped shape a specific person's life because you were inclusive?
I have to say that start out by saying that, in my own path, every step of the way, along the way, somebody came out of somewhere and lifted me up. And time again, that happened to me. And I think when you've been lifted up, it becomes quietly your purpose. I don't even think it's somewhat conscious. It's just sort of what you do. So I won't go to one, but I'll go to the fact that I'm constantly really interested in understanding when somebody new comes into our organization, what's their background, what's their capability, where can they play the biggest role, and then oftentimes for me, I think of myself as the temperature setter for the organization. As you know, as a leader, any little individual thing that you do becomes amplified. So it could be something that's really, really positive, or it could be something that might be slightly negative. And so oftentimes I find myself trying to spend about 35% of my energy remaining calm, which in and of itself is somewhat contagious. And it allows me to have better conversations with people and help them with whatever they're struggling with.
I thought that should have been in the word cloud, Renee. I thought that stay calm. I thought that as well. That needs to be definitely an attribute that a CEO needs to have. We have another question from Ray, who asks, is inclusive and equitable culture a leadership problem or a lack of well-developed programs? Nita, I'm going to go to you first on that one. What do you think?
Well, a culture is all about leadership. Again, setting the tone at the top and creating a culture. And the culture, by the way, is the most powerful asset a company has. And so as leaders, we are called to create the conditions in which people live and work. And so for me, that is absolutely a leadership issue. And as leaders, we are called to create meaning, especially at a time like this where I feel like we're in a stamina race. So it's been 2 years now that people are working virtually and they're challenged. And I feel like when you have burnout, when you have exhaustion, at least those times in my life when I feel that way, I always connect myself to meaning. And so as leaders, I think that we have an obligation to create meaning in the work that we do and translate that to others, creating a culture of meaning and purpose.
Yeah, for both of you, with the minute or so that we have left, I wanted to ask you who you lean into for advice. Everyone goes to the CEO all the time, and that's why, Renee, you said you got to stay calm. But it's important for you all to connect to others, to reach out to others. So how do you encourage those who want to be allies to join you? Who do you lean into, Renee?
I lean in first to leaders everywhere, other CEOs. I make a point of leaving my organization, either physically or virtually, and just going into different environments where there are different perspectives and they're learning. But I'd also say that, I often use the phrase, I'm the student of our CIO, or I'm the student of our head of communications. Because I think if you can posture yourself to listen to those individuals and help them activate what's going on, you never get stale. And as a leader, if you have one playbook, it's not only going to go so far. So you need lots of others, and you've got to immerse yourself in a wide spectrum of outside perspectives.
Absolutely. Nina, who do you lean into?
I love Renee's answer. It's so beautiful. I lean into an open mindset where I can continue to learn and draw. Experiences from other CEOs is a really important place. It is a lonely place at the top, but it doesn't have to be. I find that I look for people that share my values, but maybe may have similar experiences that can be additive. I also look for people that have challenging energy, that aren't just agreeing with you. You get a lot of that when you're a CEO. You get yes, people that are agreeing with you, but the people that give you the gift of feedback, the people that love you enough to give you honest, candid feedback and bring that challenging energy and bring the heat on a little bit, That's what I lean into the most, is when I'm in the heat, because when I'm in the heat, that's when I'm learning the most.
And that's when I'm learning the most, when I'm in the heat, when I'm listening to your story, when I'm listening to Renee's story. You learn so much. And as Jose said just now in the chat, he said silence is violence. We have to tell our stories. We have to share our stories. So I thank you both, Renee and Nina, for being honest, for being candid, for sharing your stories and your insights. And we look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. You know, also leading the charge for equity and opportunity is an inspiring executive who has not only created change within his own company, but has convinced nearly 2,000 fellow CEOs to commit to the cause as co-founder and of CEO Action for Diversity and Inclusion. Tim Ryan is U.S. Chairman and Senior Partner at PwC, and he spoke with CNBC's Rahel Solomon to share his executive playbook.
Tim, thanks for being with us. So, I just want to start with what drove you to prioritize workplace diversity. You've been called an unlikely leader in this space. And to borrow a quote from you said in 2016, being outraged with racism is not enough. We need to roll up our sleeves and help each other make progress. So what started this process for you?
Yeah, thanks, Rahel. It's great to be with you today. And to everybody, welcome and thank you. For me, my journey as a CEO, we call it senior partner at PwC, it began in 2016. My first day was July 1, 2016. And I tell people I had a really great business plan when I was elected CEO by my partners. It was about revenue, it was about growth and market share, traditional things. And the first week that I was our senior partner, we woke up on that Friday morning of my first week to shootings in Dallas and violence in Dallas. And for me, that was a turning point. I did what many CEOs did at that time. I reached out to our employees and I told them, I know something bad has happened. I care about you. And if something's on your mind, I'd like to hear about it. What happened after that was in fact truly remarkable. What happened was I heard from hundreds of our employees across the country about their feelings around what happened in Dallas in 2016. And by the way, that was on the heels of violence in Minneapolis and in St. Louis back in the summer and the spring of 2016. And as I read through the responses that our employees gave us, one of them hit me the most. And we as a firm have been on a D&I journey for the last 20 years, so it was not anything new to us. But one of our people said in an email to me, they said, Tim, notwithstanding all the progress we've made, when I showed up to work that Friday morning in early July 2016, the silence was deafening. In Rahel, for me, that was the turning point. That's when I realized that amazing business plan that I had developed needed to go out the window. What I realized is that as a leader, your job is to inspire people. Your job is to get the most out of the people. Your job is to create an environment where people don't show up and the silence is deafening. And so for me, that was the pivot point. And that was the time where we said, we're going to listen, we're going to understand, and really take the time to figure out what was the root cause and why that happened. And just quickly, that led 2.5 weeks later, which for a large organization is unprecedented. We shut the firm down on July 21, 2016, and we had a day-long discussion about race. And that's where we learned things that we didn't understand before. We learned them from the heart, not from the statistics. We learned what it was like to be a black person in our New York office, and when you were going to Central Park for a softball game, walking down Fifth Ave and not feeling safe. We learned what it was like to be a father teaching your child how to get pulled over in Atlanta. And for us, that was the big change. So for me, that was the pivot point.
And so I think, fortunately, we're in a space where many of us agree that it's time to not only have these conversations, but to do something about it. And so for people watching, what are 1, 2, 3 things that they can implement today, tomorrow, this week to really sort of jumpstart their efforts already?
Yeah, the critical advice I would give anybody, whether it be one of my 6 children or whether it be somebody who I have the privilege of working with here at PwC, I'd ask people to get engaged and listen and learn. I'd ask people to understand what it's like to be a woman in the workplace, what it's like to be black in the workplace, and what their lives are like outside of work. And so my first very practical piece of advice is, listen, take time to go on the journey. Suspend your biases, suspend what you think you know, and really take time to understand. For me, that is sitting down over coffees in conference rooms, going for walks with our people, and really understanding. So my first one is take time to listen and suspend biases. My second piece of advice is I would encourage all of us to move from beyond pointing out problems, because I believe in life it's very easy to point out problems. Any one of us who wants to point out problems, we don't have to look too far. There's plenty of problems in day-to-day life and in the day-to-day world, but move to saying, I'm going to be a problem solver. How do I make it better? How do I make somebody's morning better? How do I make somebody's afternoon better, their challenges better? And adopt a mindset of problem solver, of comforter, of somebody that I'm going to make people feel better. And my third piece of advice is decide to be an activist. Like, be an activist in your world with the people that you touch. Take activism seriously and say, I'm going to use the platform that I have, whether you're in college, whether you're just starting in a workplace, or you've been in the workplace for 20 years, I'm going to be an activist to make a difference. So, Rahel, those are very practical and things that I would recommend to anybody, because together we do things like that, we really make forward progress.
Very practical. So get engaged, be a problem solver, and be an activist. And I'd love to sort of just follow up with that, because I was working on a story and speaking with a woman, an equity strategist, and she said that she pointed to some research that showed only 3%, or a very small percentage, of people of color were looking forward to coming back to the office. And part of the reason why is because of microaggressions and because of perhaps not feeling as safe in the office. And so I wonder if this is perhaps a great time to get engaged and have those conversations with employees of color and with people as they're coming back into the office about, you know, what is it like being a person of color in this company? What is it like, you know, inside work and outside of work? And so I imagine maybe the timing is a good time to have those conversations as people are coming back to the office.
Yeah, without a doubt, Rahel. Like, one of the things that happened during this pandemic was our world pivoted when George Floyd was murdered, and that was incredibly tragic. One of the things that came out of that, when tragedy happens, sometimes really good things come out of those tragedies. And what came out is the whole world saw what our black citizens, what our black employees and our coworkers live with every day. The whole world saw the challenges and the worries that they have. And coming out of that is the world began to have candid conversations that happened all across corporate America, primarily by video, where people then began to understand what it's like. How do you feel? And that opened up dialogues around feelings and challenges and learning. And we saw what I'll say our collective learning curve of the challenges and the barriers open up in ways that we would have never been able to see on an accelerated basis when George Floyd was killed. Now, as we come back to the workplace, it's incumbent on us to continue that. And they can be even more powerful face-to-face. At PwC, we've been doing that since 2016. So I think we need to be very conscious, very intentional as we come back to the workplace to say, let's continue that. Now, not over a screen, but let's do it one-on-one. And if you're a white majority in the workplace, be the leader, be the activist, and say, I want to continue to learn about you. How do you feel coming back? What are you worried about? What's it been like as you've been winding down this pandemic? If you're black in the workplace, be comfortable, seek out allies to have those conversations. To me, the biggest travesty would be we lose the momentum that we gained around learning and understanding. And so I think it's a great time coming back to the workplace to continue to build that.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we know what often gets measured often gets done. And so what benchmarks do you use at PwC to sort of determine and examine how well you're doing, or maybe some areas of improvement?
Yeah, so I'm a huge believer in transparency, and transparency is important. It's a principle. And transparency is not only when you're doing well, transparency is when you're not doing well. I also happen to believe we're entering the golden age of transparency around everything. I don't believe there's any secrets today, whether what a company does, their organizations, their customers, their employees, their strengths and their weaknesses. So for us at PwC, it starts with transparency. One of the things that I'm very proud is that in 2020, we issued our first ever transparency report around where we are around DE&I in the workplace. That was 3 years in the making. That was one of the commitments we made internally back in 2017 coming out of the learnings we had from those shootings in Dallas and what we began to learn from one another. And we laid out where we are and, more importantly, where we're not. And so we laid out where we are in terms of representation at our board level, at our leadership team level, at every level in the organization. And for us, that cascades down. Every one of our partners now knows where we stand on our engagement teams, where we can improve and the like. So those metrics are important. And more importantly, it's talking about progress on those metrics. My big piece of advice to anybody would be, don't be afraid of transparency. Don't be afraid of where you're not if you're not ready, because frankly, nobody's where they need to be. But it is through transparency that we make that forward progress. So for us, it's laying out exactly what those key metrics are and then measuring progress.
Yeah. And to that point, I think what goes hand in hand with transparency is accountability. So I want to weave in one question from a viewer from the audience. How do we go from talks and trainings to using data to hold people accountable? And if I may ask, and who's holding whom accountable? Is it employees who maybe witness some areas that could use improvement, or is there a formalized process?
Yeah, it's a great question, Rahel. So I often tell this story, like when you look at corporate America, if a company had an acquisition that was not going well, if a company had a liquidity problem on its balance sheet, the management team, the CEO, would never go into the board and say, look, it's a journey. Like that balance sheet liquidity problem, that deal integration that's not going well, it's a journey. Like we would never do that. The board would throw that management team out. We need to bring that same level of intensity to making sure our workplaces are inclusive, to make sure they're diverse. And why is that so important? Personally, I believe it's the right thing to do. But it's also a major business imperative. Talent is important. Diverse thinking is in talent. Customers want diversity. Investors want diversity because they know it brings better answers. So it is that same level of discipline that is important. So now to your question, accountability starts first with the CEO. Accountability starts with the management team around what are we going to measure and how are we going to measure it. And not only accountability when it doesn't get done, but also how do we reward when it gets done. So at PwC, people who are driving diverse teams are ultimately, they're driving better client results, and we're rewarding that. That's how we promote, that's how we advance, and that's how we recognize great behavior. So accountability to me has a negative connotation to it. It needs to be there, to be clear. If somebody isn't delivering on diverse teams, diverse thinking, and better client results, they are accountable. But equally, we're rewarding that behavior because we know it results in better results for our clients and better results for our people.
Positive reinforcement. And then I do want to ask one last question, just because I thought it was really interesting in a piece that I read. What was sort of the reaction internally? You know, I think it's an uncomfortable conversation, but, you know, I read that some question like, look, Tim, I'm on your side. I completely believe in the cause. But what about me? I've been here for 25 years. You know, I'm a white man, but I've put in my time and I've done the work. I mean, how do you manage that part of the conversation?
So what I would say is anything worth doing is going to have challenges. My mother told me once that there's no easy answer in life. And I think that is important for all of us to understand. Our workplaces across the United States, across the globe, they need to be more diverse. Why? If our workplaces are more diverse, number one, people are going to feel good about themselves, and there's been way too many inequities in the workplace. But number two, innovation. You look at the challenges that are out there around climate, modernizing healthcare, Web 3.0, metaverse. The way we capture that innovation is diverse thinking and diverse teams. It is the right thing to do, and it is a necessity. As we look to make our workplaces more diverse, inevitably, you have challenges because you're disrupting the status quo. And you have people asking the majority, how do I fit in? And for me, as you mentioned, Rahel, that's been a journey. Like we have been relentless around making PwC more diverse. But as we do that, there are unintended consequences. We don't want to lose the majority. We don't want to lose people who have been working hard for a long time and want opportunities. But we also have to create opportunities, and we have to do it based upon merit, but be completely unbiased around how we do that. So for me, as we've looked to promote people, as we look to assign people to clients, one of the things that has come out of that is I've had many of the majority say to me, Tim, I get it. Like, I believe it here. I know it's the right thing to do. I also see the data, and I know that we need to do better. but I'm struggling to find my place in the journey now because some of those roles I was hoping to get. And so for me, I've invested time with those people. I've not chastised them because they get it. They've told me they want to do the right thing. They see the data, and we've helped to redefine success. One of the things I've been massively encouraged about is how many of the majority, not only at PwC, but across corporate America, saying, I am now redefining success. My success, I'm going to help somebody else into that role. I'm going to look at their success and take pride. I'm going to mentor somebody to get those roles that I was looking for, and now I want to give somebody else that opportunity. And I've encouraged people to help redefine success and really play to the heart in the fact that I made a difference in that journey. We have to have those hard conversations, because if we're not going to make the progress that we're looking to do. And that, from a leadership level, is one of the biggest areas that leadership can play, which is spending time not with just our women and our underrepresented minorities, but with the majority, and helping redefine success, thanking them for investing and being a role model to make sure we get that equity in the workplace that we're looking for.
Hard but necessary conversations. Tim, I could talk to you all day about this, but I'm being told to wrap it up, so we'll have to unfortunately leave it here. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Rahel, and thank you very much, everybody.
Very interesting conversation, and our thanks to Rahel Solomon and Tim for the insights there, insights from the top, quite literally. Well, building a truly diverse company means creating a workplace that is accessible to all. And we're about to have a conversation about where to find and how to recruit untapped talent. But first, take a look at one way to make our workplaces more inclusive.
Some fascinating statistics there. You know, the labor shortage continues to be a massive problem, and one remedy may be tapping into untapped talent pools for new workers, while at the same time keeping your current employees engaged and feeling valued. Joining me now to talk about how to do both are Brian Lamb, the Global Head of Diversity and Inclusion at J.P. Morgan, and Gorik Ng, Career Advisor at Harvard and the author of a great book, The Unspoken Rules, Secrets to Starting Your Career Off Right. Welcome to both of you. Thanks so much for being here. Brian, I want to start with you because J.P. Morgan Chase has taken a rather unconventional approach to finding untapped talent, focusing on second chance hiring, neurodiverse workers, and those re-entering the workforce. Can you tell us a little bit about how you're doing this to attract diverse talent?
No, absolutely. Look, I think you said it well. Like there's a labor shortage, and I think we're all experiencing that globally. So it's going to require unconventional approaches, and I'll give you a couple of examples on how we're thinking about building our talent pipeline, while at the same time pursuing and making progress around our diversity goals and progress at the firm. First, as I think about the strategy around people with disabilities, and kind of double-click on neurodiversity, right? Those that are neurodivergent, we know there's over 600 examples of disabilities in the neurodiverse population. A couple specific examples of what we're doing and how we're thinking about it. Number one, we're looking at things like autism as well as other intellectual disabilities and developments, and recruiting pipelines where we're providing and working with partners across the footprint globally. We actually are in 9 different countries right now focused on these global strategies. What we're doing when we work with these partners, they're helping us identify, select, and assess talent that we can move into these programs. Hundreds of individuals that we believe can go into over 40 roles across J.P. Morgan Chase. This is an outstanding opportunity for us to really tap into that talent. And I think another salient point is we're making sure they're job ready not just before they join, but while they're with the firm. That their experience as they acclimate into the firm, we have programs in place to make sure that we're doing that, and that our managers and our leaders are also proximate to the needs and support that these employees need in order to perform at their highest level. So we're really excited about this strategy, and it's really worked well, and we're going to continue to expand that in the marketplace and work with partners that can be that connective tissue for us as we build out this talent pipeline. Next, as we think about second chance, those that have criminal backgrounds, we know 1 in 3 Americans have a criminal background. That can create significant barriers to them entering the workforce. The actions that we're taking at J.P. Morgan Chase, a couple of specific examples. One, we call it banning the box, right? Eliminating that question on the initial application. This speaks to, do you have a criminal background? Number 2, what are we doing to really work with partners in the marketplace that have the credibility and the expertise to help us with career coaching, right? Mock interviews, resume building, and the wraparound services that ultimately we can hire individuals into the workplace. We've seen those numbers significantly grow for us here at J.P. Morgan Chase. We're hiring thousands of individuals with criminal backgrounds into the workplace at our firm, and that is another specific example of what we're doing to make progress around tapping into these talent pools that have historically been left behind.
You know, one thing that came up, Brian, in a survey that just was released today that CNBC did on women at work is the level of ambition for women that has increased actually during the pandemic. And how are companies addressing that? How are companies like J.P. Morgan addressing that, particularly with women who may have been out of the workforce and want to come back?
Yep. Well, when you think about women in the workforce, there's so many really key considerations to make sure we're creating access and opportunity. When we think about that talent, I just want to give you a very specific example. When we think about our re-entry program here at J.P. Morgan Chase, it's a global program that we think about around the world. And specifically what we're doing, reflect on the last few years where we know a number of women have left the workplace for a number of reasons, personal reasons, reasons around caring for their children and their families, those that may be sick, or even their own well-being. We've got to create access and pathways for them to come back to the workplace. So specifically in our reentry program, where we have thousands of individuals that are applying for a 15-week fellowship program, this is really important and differentiated because what it's really doing is not only knowing that these individuals are accomplished and have historically been in the workplace, but how do we make sure they're job ready to come back and they're well positioned to acclimate into the future of work. The jobs that we know after they finish their 15-week program, their fellowship program, right now over 90% of those individuals move into full-time employment. We have more applications than we even do openings. So if they don't go into the fellowship program, we have opportunities for direct hire. Individuals that can go right back into the workplace. And so we have found this as a significant win because the fellowship program, over 90% of those individuals are women. And we also see it as a significant opportunity to build that talent pipeline around the world. A key point that I just want to touch on, whether it's in the neurodiverse strategy, what we're doing in Second Chance, or our reentry program for women, the intersectionality around race, gender, ethnicity is significant. As we know, there are opportunities to continue to bolster our own commitment that we have here at the firm and advance our own strategy of respect and inclusion with these programs in addition to addressing the labor shortage.
Absolutely, Brian. Such robust programs and innovative programs that you're putting to work there. But, Gorick, here is the issue. You know, many companies, after they're recruiting the diverse talent into their workforce, they're not ensuring that those workers stay in advance. What mistakes are employers making in terms of making sure that diverse talent stays there, that they're advanced, that they're promoted? And how can employers fix those mistakes?
Absolutely, Sharon. One of the big challenges when it comes to diversity, inclusion, equity, belonging is a belief that hiring diverse talent is all that it takes, when really it's only a quarter of the battle. Making sure that your diverse talent is, and frankly, every single member of your diverse workforce is excited, feels supported, and feels valued. That's really what it takes to separate someone who feels engaged from someone who feels disengaged. It's the difference between making someone ascend to a position of leadership versus maybe get stuck in that sticky floor and not even get a chance to bump their heads up against that glass ceiling. And so some of the mistakes that I see organizations making, the first one is a belief that that good employees are born rather than developed. And Brian spoke to this earlier when it came to ensuring that employees are not just showing up, but that they're successful on the job, whether it's making sure that they can attend meetings, that they can be seen and heard, that they can take ownership, that they're ascending to positions of leadership. Another big challenge is not taking a holistic view of the employee journey. Often employers will take a siloed approach to their talent strategy. They'll think about things in terms of talent acquisition, campus recruiting, onboarding, learning and development, talent development, leadership development, all of which exist in discrete silos. And when you have the siloed set of activities, you end up with a patchwork of results. When really we should be thinking about talent development from the perspective of what does it look like for an employee to show up in my workforce and ascend to a position of leadership. Put yourself in the shoes of someone who shows up not knowing who their manager is on their first day. Put yourself in the shoes of someone who shows up in a meeting not knowing anyone. Put yourself in the shoes of someone who tries to speak up in a meeting and doesn't feel heard or seen. Put yourself in the shoes of an employee who shows up in the performance evaluation being told to take more initiative when really they weren't set up to succeed in the first place. So taking this more holistic view is really important as we think about how to not just acquire talent, but make sure that they're engaged, they're developed, and they become your future leaders.
Yeah, well, you've answered some of this, perhaps, but I think Cassandra's question that just came in is a very good one. And it says, how can I make a constructive difference with those who don't think diversity and inclusion are real concerns and just want to hire and promote the, quote, most qualified person without thinking about everything that entails? Gaurav, what do you think?
Absolutely. And DEI is not just for the heart, it's also for the head. No matter if you're a large organization or a small one, you have big ambitions. And those big ambitions involve developing products, services, and offerings that will hopefully resonate with a diverse audience. In business, this is about deepening your market penetration and expanding your market share. Well, the challenge there is you need to empathize with and relate to an audience that may not have the same lived experiences as you do. Here, what's required is to bring on talent and to be collaborative with people who have a different set of life experiences from you. So when it comes to diversity, inclusion, equity, belonging, it's not just about having a fancy brochure. It's not just about making sure that you're saying the right things at the right time for the sake of getting in the press and having the marketing sound bites that you need. But it's about actually having better judgment. It's about having better products and services. It's about actually having a differentiated strategy and more sound decision-making in your enterprise.
Yeah. To show that you have a differentiating strategy, you need to have data. You need to be able to show what you're doing and why you need to do it. And Brian, how do you do that at JP Morgan? And how important is it to share it holistically with the people who are inside the companies and stakeholders who may be outside as well?
Well, when I think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, at our firm, we principally believe it's not only a business imperative. It needs to have the key elements of a successful business. We can't really make decisions and run a healthy strategy without data and DE&I. I'll give you a couple specific examples on how we use data. First, whether we reflect on the programs I mentioned earlier or other strategies, we use the data to inform the job to be done. The problem isn't subjective. We aren't using a bunch of various opinions. We're really data-driven in terms of identifying the real root cause of what we're trying to solve. Second, we're going to inspect and monitor our progress around the commitments that we make. Like any healthy business, we want to track our progress and course correct using data if we think we aren't making the progress we need. We talked about accountability and transparency earlier, key elements of any good business. That also is how we use data. So we share a lot of our results and progress and commitments internally with our senior leadership and employees, as well as externally with key stakeholders through our traditional reports, whether it's our ESG report, our annual report in 10K, our proxy, other opportunities for us to be transparent around the progress that we're making on specific initiatives. And so I think as we use data to inform the problem and pull that thread all the way through to how we inspect our own progress and hold ourselves accountable, that's how we're ultimately going to drive outcomes and impact for the communities we're looking to serve.
Yeah, you both are having quite an impact in our chat. We have Julia making a comment about when she sees as Chief Diversity Officer reporting to the CEO, she says, it gives me hope that a change is possibly coming. But, Gorik, I know you say it's not just a top-down approach that needs to be taken when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. It needs to be bottom-up as well. How do you do that, though, at a large company or at a smaller firm?
Yeah, so far in the segment, we've talked a great deal about how culture is set from the top. But whether your culture is truly an inclusive one is going to depend upon your middle and frontline managers. It's going to depend on how they run meetings, how they delegate, how they motivate employees, how they welcome someone onto their teams. And so when it comes to making sure that your culture is truly an inclusive one where people belong and are engaged, I would encourage employers to ask themselves, well, when was the last time your managers were trained on how to delegate, how to run meetings, how to bring someone onto the team? The challenge is so much of these are learned behaviors. They're passed down from mentor to mentee or from parent to child, which makes for an unlevel playing field between those who've had this informal education over the dinner table from those who are learning through so much of this through trial and error. And it comes back to this idea of the sticky floor where someone who may have the potential to succeed may not have had the training and the development to succeed. And as a result, they end up leaving your organization long before they even have a chance to be considered for that leadership position. So thinking about culture not just as something that is sent out through a memo by the C-suite, but thinking about how this actually manifests itself over the course of an employee's daily life, both in the workplace as well as remotely.
Absolutely. You know, Jill has a very important question here as well in terms of how can we ensure that executive pay in some way is tied to positive change in DEI metrics. Brian, how do you do that?
Well, you know, as we talked a little bit about accountability, and when you think about how that starts at the very top of the house, I know our chairman and CEO at JP Morgan Chase and Jamie Dimon always is holding us accountable to driving outcomes. And when we think about holding our leaders accountable through compensation and pay, we announced an accountability framework that does just that. It really looks at the commitments that we've made and the progress that we want to make over time around representation, diversifying the supply chain, how we're creating the right inclusive experience for our employees, and laddering that up into how our most senior level leaders are making progress and holding them accountable each and every day. And so that's something that we've thought about and really wanted to build at scale for our global leaders. And even if you aren't a global firm, no matter where you are in the journey, you are able to put accountability in place to inspect and monitor your progress. And think about the concept of a now, a near, and a far, which as you set your strategies, whether it be accountability, whether it be specific programs to tap into this talent, there are things that you can do in the immediate term. And then over the next 6 to 12 months, there may be other things that you can do to really ladder into the momentum that you want to build within your firm. And then longer term in the far, these are really the big rocks that it may take a little bit more time to build the infrastructure, change the culture, put the right process in place, and maybe even hire the talent. But they clearly are on the horizon, and you want to map your way into those strategies so that you principally can embed DE&I into how you do business.
Exactly. Embedded in how you do business, how you recruit, but also how you advance the talent that you have recruited from these untapped pools, and to make sure you continue to have diverse talent. We thank you so much for your time this afternoon, Brian and Gorik. It was a pleasure to speak with you, and thank you again. We're going to have you back soon, I hope. You know, I just want to make sure that there's a reminder here for folks who are in the audience that if we didn't get to your question during this session, and I'm going through the chat, you have so many of them, and I thank you for that, but there's going to be an opportunity to answer those questions and to have a more robust discussion among one another in the exchange. And that's where we plan to get to many more questions. That'll happen right after this full event. And make sure you stay for the exchange to get your question answered. Tyler, over to you.
It will be very easy to find, Sharon, and you were exactly right. There was so much engagement there running down on the chat side of the screen during that session. It was really amazing to see the very different perspectives and lots of agreement on what needs to be done as well. Sharon, thanks. At today's Equity and Opportunity Forum, we are excited to unveil the third annual CNBC Momentiv Women at Work survey. And our Julia Borston joins us with the latest results. Hi, Julia.
Hi, Tyler. Thanks so much. Well, we know that the pandemic had a devastating effect on women in the workplace. 2 years in, 1.1 million women are still missing from the workforce, according to the National Women's Law Center. But our CNBC Momentiv survey found more women are eager to advance in their careers and they're making progress. Nearly half of women polled consider themselves very ambitious. That's up 4 percentage points from 2021, though still 5 percentage points below our results from our pre-pandemic survey. Now, about a third of working women say they're very satisfied with career opportunities in their current job. That is back to pre-pandemic levels. And 20% of all women say their career has advanced in the past year. That's up 6 percentage points from 2021. Now, part of all of that ambition ties to increased dialogue with management. 32% of women polled say that they talk to their manager at least monthly about their career goals. That is up 7 percentage points from 2021. Women of color saying they're seeing more progress than white women are, with 28% of Hispanic women in the workforce and 26% of black women in the workplace saying that their career has advanced in the past year. That compares to just 16% of white women saying the same. And about a third of younger women age 18 to 34 report career advancement in the past year. That's compared to less than a fifth of 35 to 64-year-olds. Now, things do seem tougher for working moms. Nearly 30% with kids under age 18 say that their career has taken a setback compared to 18% of women with no young kids. But on the upside, there are things that employers can do to help this group achieve their career goals. One is offering more opportunities for on-the-job training or financial support for further education. Now, I want to shift gears a little bit and bring in a guest, a woman who has managed to advance in the particularly male-dominated field of the NHL in this broader world of professional sports. Lindsay Artkin, president of the National Hockey League Coaches Association. Lindsay, thank you so much for talking to us here today. You have such great perspective on these issues. And before I ask you to reflect on some of those trends that I just discussed, I want to highlight the work that you're doing at the NHL to try to bring in more women. Talk to us about your initiative.
Well, first of all, thanks, Julia, for having me on today. It's a pleasure to talk to everybody. What we are trying to do at the National Hockey League Coaches Association is diversify the faces you see behind the benches of the 32 NHL teams. Right now, it is 100% men, and it's predominantly white men. So the program that we've created, the NHLCA Female Coaches Development Program, its ultimate objective is to get women behind those benches. Now, there's a lot of runway ahead for us in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. We need to start building up the developmental pipelines that ultimately lead to the NHL to get those women ready to step behind the bench. But there's a lot of progress we've already made over the past 2 years since we've launched the program, and we're excited about what's ahead. So that's a little bit about where we're at today.
So let's take a step back, though, and explain your approach to this, because what you're doing is so important. And I also think can be a model for others who might be interested in replicating it or doing something similar in their fields. How did you determine that this was something that you wanted to do and could do? And what is your strategy for making progress here?
The light bulb moment for me personally, in terms of when I really realized we had to put an effort into developing a program to support women in hockey, and, you know, I have the support of all 200 of our NHL coaches in doing this, is back in 2019, we were at the NHL draft in Vancouver, and we run a global coaches conference there. And I was on stage giving the opening remarks. And in the audience of 500 people, there was maybe 5 women. And that was the light bulb moment for me when I realized we really have to make change. And At first, it can be hard to conceptualize what you can actually do. Everybody agrees we need to be much more focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, but how does that actually manifest in terms of a tangible program, actionable steps, and a cohesive program that you can put out there to start? So I think other industries, what they can learn from what we've started to do is that you don't necessarily need a fully formed plan. Just start doing something. And so what we started to do is, I walked off that stage and I picked up the phone and I networked with as many women coaching across North America at all different levels as I could to try to understand what they felt the career hurdles were to their advancement through the professional ranks of hockey. And what I was hearing was probably what you would hear in many different industries, not just in hockey or professional sports. It's a lot of gender biases and societal misconceptions that they were challenged by. And a few reoccurring themes I kept hearing over and over and over again was it was hard to crack the old boys network at the NHL level. And so for us, instilling a core pillar of networking within the program was fundamental to us knowing we'd eventually be successful with getting women behind the bench. Obviously, you need to know your stuff. You need to know your X's and O's. You need to be the best coach you can be to be in the NHL. Those teams are there to win. It's highly competitive. There's very few spots. So ensuring that we upskilled the women in our program to be able to be ready to step behind the bench and compete at the same level as their male peers was also another really fundamental part. And then thirdly, the main focus really was on visibility and exposure for the women in the program. So getting them opportunities to tell their story in the public spotlight, the whole idea of if you see it, you can be it, and featuring these women prominently within the hockey community, not just in North America, but globally, was a really important focus for the program too.
So many powerful takeaways that I'm sure can be applied to other industries. You mentioned visibility most recently, but also education and upskilling and networking. And I'm going to ask you to expand on that networking a bit, because obviously women are still very much in the minority. How do you see male allyship and how do you encourage that across the NHL?
We wouldn't have success with this program if I didn't have the support of all of our NHL coaches. And what I've realized being in this role is that coaches love to learn from other coaches, and it doesn't matter what level of hockey you're at. They love to connect. They love to get new ideas. Diversity of ideas is really what a winning team needs. And so as a coach, you're looking everywhere for that. I constantly hear from our NHL coaches that the moment you stop learning is the moment that you get left behind in the NHL. And so when I originally presented all of our NHL coaches with the opportunity to meet these women, network with them, build new relationships, they were completely on board because they saw it as a new pool of talent from which they could learn and continue to grow themselves, while reciprocally, helping those women in the program with their relationships across the hockey community, across North America, in all different levels. And so facilitating one-on-one networking sessions, small group breakout sessions over Zoom during the pandemic has been really successful in terms of strengthening the relationships between the women in our program and our NHL coaches.
It's interesting. I wonder, hearing what you're saying about the sense that everyone needs to keep on learning and iterating, whether there's an acknowledgement that female talent in the NHL might be an underestimated opportunity and an opportunity for the whole league to continue to improve.
It's certainly an incredible untapped opportunity, and you can look at other professional sports, whether it's the NFL or the NBA or MLB. They all have women in coaching roles or management roles in those leagues. And so the NHL is certainly behind in following along in that path. But we're on the right path, and there's such an eagerness from NHL coaches and just the NHL teams, front offices, management to really, start expanding their network, find the right candidates to get them into the roles. What's encouraging is seeing a lot of the NHL teams making significant hires of women in their front office, whether it's in the general manager, assistant general manager role, or different VP levels across the organization. So change is coming. It's slow like any other industry, but we're on the right path for sure.
Yeah, no, Lindsay, I would be curious to ask you to reflect on some of the numbers that I just discussed in the lead up to our interview. This sense that though women did suffer many setbacks during the pandemic, there is a lot of ambition and a lot of people making progress right now. How do you think we are right now in terms of being at a turning point, perhaps, in bringing more women either back into the workforce or helping women accelerate their careers?
I think society as a whole has advanced so much just in the past few years as well. Hearing those numbers was incredibly encouraging. I myself come from a finance background, and I know 10 years ago I was one of a few women on the trading desk. And so hearing about the change that's coming across North America, whether it's in finance or in sports, is exciting. Now, we're behind, obviously, in the NHL, but where I've been encouraged over the past 18 months since we've launched this program is to see some significant hires in the developmental leagues that feed up into the NHL.
Mm-hmm.
So getting women into those coaching roles already is a step in the right direction of moving them behind the NHL bench, too.
Well, we will leave it on that optimistic note. Lindsay, I very much appreciate you talking to us today.
Thanks so much. Pleasure to be here.
All right, Julia,
Tyler,
thank you
back
very
over
much.
you.
Julia Boorstin, and I'm all right, fantastic. I'm very proud to say this. There is a book coming out. It's by Julia Boorstin, and it is called When Women Lead. It will be published this fall, and we can't wait to read it. I don't know how she does it. She's a busy mom. She's on television every day, but she found time somehow to write a book. We're proud of you, Julia. We'll be watching for the book come summer. Thanks again. All righty. Former NFL player Emmanuel Acho is the author of another best-selling book. It's called Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. His new book is titled Illogical, Saying Yes to a Life Without Limits. He says when it comes to race, all of us need to be a thermostat, not a thermometer. Let's learn what he means by that. Our instructor will be CNBC special correspondent Jane Wells, who recently sat down with Emmanuel Acho.
Thank you, and thank you, Emmanuel, for joining us today. I so appreciate it. You've written and talked and podcast about difficult conversations, so let's have a difficult conversation about the business world. Right now, given everything that's happened, there's been a lot of talk, some action. Is it any easier for a Black person to get a good-paying job and to move up the chain of management, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think it is easier for a Black person singular, but I'm not convinced that it is easier for Black people collectively. I think in the wake of the murder of George Floyd, we saw so much positive action, verbally, so much commitment from different companies, from different organizations, from different businesses. And that change allowed for a Black person here or a Black person there to climb the corporate ladder, whatever corporate company they have been at. But I don't think that we have yet fixed or figured out how to fix the systemic and structural fractures that currently exist in society. So if you want to talk about a Black person singular, absolutely. I do believe that it has been easier in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. And the reason I say easier is just because there's now been an awareness to the lack of diversity across several corporations. However, we still have to fix the systemic and the structural issues apart large-scale organizations.
I want to talk about those. One thing you've written about is implicit bias. So if two resumes come in, one says Emmanuel Acho and the other says Jane Wells, the manager may say, you know what, I really like that Jane Wells. What advice do you give to someone to sort of check themselves and think about their implicit bias in a hiring process or promotion process?
Yeah, Jane, you bring up a good point. The study says that two people with equal resumes, the person with the white-sounding name is twice as likely to get the job as the person with the black-sounding name. This was based upon empirical data from 2017. I always say this, denial, the word denial spelled D-E-N-I-A-L. Don't even know I am lying. You can't fix a problem, Jane, that you do not know exists. And so to those that want to understand the concept of implicit bias, will first understand that there is a problem in which you might not actually be aware of. Understand that maybe you didn't even realize that you prefer the person with the white-sounding name as an employer. Maybe you're not even cognizant of the fact that you err against the person with the black-sounding name, if you will. Jane, I think we need to do a better job of trying to acquire information, not just where it's easiest to see, but rather where we actually desire the information. I'll give it to you in story form, Jane. If you and I were to walk into a restaurant and you and I were to go into the restaurant, and as soon as we walk inside, I pat my pockets down and I'm like, Jane, I must have dropped my keys outside. So I'm like, Jane, will you come help me look for them? You say, of course, Emmanuel. We walk outside, I turn right, and I start searching under the nearest light pole. Well, Jane, you might say, Emmanuel, we didn't come in from the right, we came in from the left. To which I would reply, I understand, Jane, but this is where it's easiest to see. That's what so many companies, organizations, and employers do. They go under the nearest figurative light pole where it is easiest to identify talent, predominantly white institutions, under the nearest light pole where it's easiest to hire and fire, nepotism, cronyism, let me hire my family, cronyism, let me hire my friends, as opposed to actually trying to do what is best to encourage diversity within organizations.
When you talk to corporate leaders, and I know you've also done some things with Accenture, are they hearing you?
Man, well, Jane, the person who speaks in absolutes is the absolute liar. So it would be hard for me. It would be hard for me to speak in an absolute. The companies like Accenture absolutely are more than hearing me. They are speaking alongside and with me, and led by Jimmy Etheridge, CEO of Accenture, who's just done a phenomenal job and is continuing to take strides within that company. But I would say the CEOs at large desire to listen. The first step towards change is desire. But eventually we have to move from optics to outcomes. After George Floyd was murdered, every company was worried about optics because optics might affect bottom line. But at this junction in time, we need to move away from optics and really start to move towards outcomes. We need to stop counting numbers and make sure that the numbers count. So I won't speak in absolutes, but I am very encouraged by the conversations I've had and with whom I've had them.
Probably one of the biggest and most successful companies in America is the NFL, your former employer. And we've heard everything, Brian Flores's accusations that there's only really paid lip service to hiring black coaches. And we've got this race norming situation with black former players getting lower payments for potential dementia. Having been in the NFL, is the NFL closer to being egalitarian than the rest of the world, or behind, or in step?
Great question. The NFL is a microcosm of society. Here's what I mean. I do not think that there is overt racism within the NFL. I think that there is racial ignorance within the NFL. I think that there is racial bias within the NFL. Let me give you all an example. Everyone knows of the Dallas Cowboys, America's team, led by owner and general manager Jerry Jones. Well, during Jerry Jones' most impressionable years in college, when he was the captain of the Arkansas Razorbacks football team, that Arkansas team was not at all integrated. So during Jerry Jones' most impressionable years, he did not have legitimized interaction with black people. So it is no coincidence then that Jerry Jones has had the opportunity to hire several head coaches over the course of his Cowboys tenure, none of which have been black. Conversely, last year's Super Bowl champion, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, had the most diverse coaching staff in the history of football, both employing women, employing black people, etc. Bruce Arians, the head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, was the first white player at Virginia Tech, his college years, to have a black roommate. So it's not as though I think the owners are overtly racist. That is not the issue. There's a systemic issue. The NFL is not based upon the harder you work, the more you get out of it. The NFL is not a meritocracy. There's the word I was searching for. The NFL is truly based upon nepotism. You hire your family, or cronyism, you hire your friends. Well, if white men have always been in hiring and firing positions of power, and the NFL is based upon nepotism and based upon cronyism, then white men will continually hire white men. And those white men will continually hire white men. And those white men, well, you all see where I am going with this one. So I don't think that the NFL is any further or any farther behind, further ahead or lagging behind. I think the NFL is a microcosm of a macro issue.
Byron Allen is a very successful black media mogul who has expressed interest in buying the Denver Broncos. And to break into that, white male club. But you also talk about, you told Colin Cowherd, there's this kind of, private text thread for the owners and the white coaches. And you're always wondering, what's the catch? And am I going to be on the text thread? If you had a black owner at the table, would that change something in the NFL regarding race?
Absolutely. Story form is the best way, I believe, to learn a lesson. So let's talk in story form. In 2007, for the first time in NFL history, two black head coaches met in the Super Bowl. It was Tony Dungy and Lovie Smith. Tony Dungy was the coach for the Indianapolis Colts, and Lovie Smith was the coach for the Chicago Bears. First time NFL history, two black coaches met in the Super Bowl. Well, Lovie Smith, who gave him his first NFL coaching opportunity? It was none other than Tony Dungy in 1996, when Tony Dungy was the coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Why do I say this? Because it took a black man giving another black man an opportunity to become a coach. And 11 years later, those two black men were now meeting in the Super Bowl at the highest level. James, statistically speaking, there was less than a 4% chance that two black head coaches would meet in the Super Bowl in 2007. But it took one black man giving another black man an opportunity. Off mic, off camera, you and I were discussing Brian Flores. We may get into this here in a second as we wind down. But Brian Flores sued the NFL, yet was given another opportunity to coach in the NFL. He was given that opportunity by Mike Tomlin, maybe a top 3 coach of this generation by Mike Tomlin, the only current black head coach with legitimized equity by Mike Tomlin, who was under the Rooney ownership, and Rooney literally created the Rooney rule, which says you must interview a minority candidate when there is a coaching vacancy. So absolutely black ownership would make a difference.
What about your own journey? You talked about in the book how you had to kind of, check yourself. Like if you and I were to get in an elevator together and we didn't know each other, you would be I'd be very aware. Of course, I'd be thinking, I think, I'm going to be honest, I think I'd be more aware because you're bigger than I am, but I'd also be aware that you're also black. And then I'd have this internal conversation of like, why are you noticing that? What does that matter? And I'd have this uncomfortable conversation. I'd probably overcompensate for it, like saying, hi, something ridiculous like that, and then continue the conversation in my head like, why did you do that? Are you feeling more at ease in situations like that, if you know what I'm saying?
Of course I know what you're saying, because we all do that, and I think anybody watching would be lying if they tried to act as though what you just said was odd or awkward or unforeseen, because we've all done that. I don't feel any more at ease, but I just don't feel any more at ease because I know society is incredibly volatile, and I know that the interaction between my white brothers and sisters and my black brothers and sisters can go awry and can go astray at any point in time. I think the media portrays negativity much more than it portrays positivity, and as a result, I am unaware that my blackness can at any point in time be portrayed as a danger to someone, and whiteness can at any point in time be weaponized. And so I am no more at ease, but I do try to acknowledge individuals, because I said this, Jane, proximity breeds care and distance breeds fear. And I do believe that small hi that you might exchange in the elevator is instantly disarming. This person is a human. They might be black, they might be white, they might be taller, they might be shorter, they might be bigger, they might be smaller, but more importantly, this person is a human and they feel just like I do.
I used to think, look, my folks were poor. I had no money. I worked my butt off. I got scholarships. We all start from the same place. What I've learned is that even though slavery ended almost 160 years ago, there were laws and policies and redlining that have continued to perpetuate keeping black people in this country down. So that I came to the realization that I was born on second base, to use a baseball analogy. I only needed to hit a double. In 2022, 159 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, if you had a son born today, is he on home base still, and is my grandson still on second base?
It's interesting. I have to make this question bigger, because if you just say my son, particularly the son of Emmanuel Acho, well, I have tried to work twice as hard, because I understand that for the most part, black people, we have a saying, you have to work twice as hard to get half as much. So I have tried to work in a position to put my lineage, my kin, if you will, further ahead. But I will say black people at large, in totality, in general, are clearly still behind white people. And it's very, very simple. My white brothers and sisters had roughly a 300-year head start. And so if you have a 300-year head start, just because we started to acknowledge racism within the last 50 years, and just because we started to emancipate slavery within the last 160 years, I mean, realistically speaking, that would not make anything equal. Look at it as from a race perspective. If you and I were both on a track, Jane, and you were 300 meters ahead of me, even if they announced go at a certain point in time, I would still be further behind you. So it would be both ignorant and naive to think that black people and white people are on equal footing. However, as a society, we should, we can, and we have continued to grow.
You get the final word. What do you want corporate America to come away from this? The managers and executives watching this, the employees, the would-be employees.
I would want every manager, CEO to know, be a thermostat and not a thermometer, because a thermostat has the ability to change the temperature in a room, but a thermometer simply has the ability to read the temperature in a room. So as a company, as an employer, as a CEO, don't just read the climate of our current culture, but change the climate of our current culture. Don't just respond when you see racism and when you see the unnecessary killing of different people, but be proactive to ensure it doesn't happen. Don't wait for something tragic to happen to change your company, but do a self-audit within your company. Be on the forefront of changing our society. Be proactive as opposed to reactive, because a thermometer and a thermostat, they both serve a purpose, but a thermostat always has the ability to change, and a thermometer simply has the ability to read.
Emmanuel Acho, thank you for joining us, and thank you for what you're doing.
Thanks so much, Shane.
And our thanks to Jane and Emmanuel as well. Welcome back, Sharon, as we come to the end of our main stage program. I'm not sure what I want to suggest is my sort of biggest takeaway here among many today. I think part is what Emmanuel was just talking about, is the need, and the title of his book, the need to have uncomfortable conversations, person to person, human to human, because there are lots of vestiges, clearly, of the stain on our history that was slavery, and that certainly there are still elements of that in our culture. I think in our corporations, one of the things that would be a takeaway for me would be it isn't enough merely to recruit a diverse workforce. It is critical to integrate, literally, that diverse workforce into the culture of the organization, whether that would be females in leadership, people of color. You have to do more than just bring people in. That's good, but that's only the first step.
Absolutely. You have to look in the mirror and say, why do I like working here? I want other people to feel that way. And if you understand that they're not feeling that way, that they're not being heard, that you're starting the meeting saying, I want to hear from you all, but let's do this. You have to listen. That active listening, that communication, that staying calm in the heat of the moment, but listening to what may be uncomfortable and not necessarily your perspective. I have to say, Tyler, right now, as Emmanuel Acho was speaking, I felt the temperature in this spot where I am feel really good. But what I want to know is, how is it going to feel when I get up from this seat to go to my desk, to go down and see you, to go across the balcony? Will I still feel as comfortable? Is the temperature, is the thermostat going to stay where it needs to stay, or is it going to fluctuate? And we know that it fluctuates, and sometimes not in the right way. So we need to keep that thermostat set at open communication, making sure that everyone feels that they belong, regardless of their abilities, disabilities, race, gender, neurodiverse, whether they need a second chance, whether they're returning to the workplace. All of those people need to be counted, need to be accounted for, and need to be advanced and promoted so that they can continue to grow in the company. That's what I want to see when I look in the mirror. And when I don't, I have to tell you, Tyler, I can't sleep at night sometimes. So it's really important that we continue these conversations, and the exchange, where I'm headed, is where we're going to keep talking about it, because people are fired up right here. They want to keep talking.
Yeah, people are fired up. And of course, diversity doesn't just mean questions of race or ethnic history. It means people with special abilities or needs. It means a lot of different things. And if you're going to truly create an equitable workforce, you have to consider the people who have maybe intellectual and developmental disabilities. You have to consider people who have physical issues that they have to overcome to integrate, bring those people in as well and take advantage of their talent. Now, Sharon, you are going to leave us now.
I am.
When I finish weeping, I'm going to finish weeping about that in just a moment. But you're going to a good place.
So
you're going
fun,
to what we call. It's been great as always to see you. Sharon and members of our partner organizations will continue this conversation in what we call the exchange. And if you look on your screen, you will see it over there on the left-hand side. You click on it. It will be a big, large group chat. I'm going to let Sharon run right now so she gets prepared for that. Sharon, it's been great to be with you. Go get ready for the exchange. And while she does that, I am going to thank all of our speakers, all of the moderators today, and all of you, and it's been literally thousands of you who were in the audience at one point or another for joining us today. We're really flattered that you would choose and complimented that you would choose to spend time with us today. We hope you found the conversations helpful and constructive, and that you will continue them within your communities, within your workplaces. Reach out, have the uncomfortable conversation. And a reminder also, you can access all of today's sessions on demand by using the QR code on your screen. We're just going to leave it up there, so if you get your phone out, you can take a picture of it, or going to our website, which is, get your pencils ready, cnbc.com/equity opportunity events. I assume that's all one word, but maybe the better, easier thing to do is to use that QR code. We will post the full videos by tomorrow. Meantime, we want to extend our special thanks to our sponsor, the Society for Human Resource Management, and all of the others who were part of today's program. Please mark your calendars for our Healthy Returns Virtual Summit. It comes up on March 30. It has been an annual event the past several years. We talked to some of the best and brightest people in the healthcare and medical field, biotechnology, everything from the cutting edges of medical developments to healthcare delivery and payers. It's time now for our Equity and Opportunity Exchange with Sharon. Once again, to get there, click on the exchange icon on the left-hand side of your screen. We welcome you to join that conversation on camera to ask questions of our featured guests, whom you see right there. Thank you again for joining us today. On behalf of my colleague and friend Sharon Epperson and all of us at CNBC Events, we hope to see you over at the Exchange and at future CNBC events. Have a great afternoon and evening, everyone. Be safe. Be well.